Sit down, mate, whenever you're ready. Make sure I edit it out later. Well, thank you very much everyone for joining us today for this New Horizons discussion on digital art and AI. My name is John Wall. I will be chairing the discussion today, and I'm joined by Peter Burnell from Dash and Rob Vale from Illuminos. And I'll invite them to do just a bit of an introduction in a second, but just to kind of round off what the conversation is about today. So I am a digital participation artist in Derbyshire. I've been working now as an artist for about 5 years, but I've also been involved in kind of arts and culture in Derby, working the Quad with Peter, and working in a number of organisations around investigating what digital practice is for organisations and artists in the region. And Stephen, and I had a conversation quite a while ago now about what does digital art practice look like in Derbyshire and how can we have these discussions. And while we are low on the ground for numbers today, I think that just highlights that kind of importance to start having these discussions, just to kind of explore who is working in the region and how we can kind of grow that network and grow that understanding of what digital arts practice means for Derbyshire. So that's just a little bit about myself and what we are here for today. And so I'm going to start with Rob. So Rob, if you'd just like to, for now, just introduce who you are and what your organisation does, and we'll delve into that a bit more.
Sure. So I'm Rob Vale, and Illuminos, which I always teased sounds like a Las Vegas magician or something, is essentially myself and my brother Matt. So we have been working, I think this year, for 20 years on video projection mapping as its core, but creating projected pieces in and around every variety of space and place. And I think our practice very much looks at this sort of triad of people, site and animation. So we always want to work with the people who know a place in that place and understand what that is, and then bring an element of animating to that site one way or another. So we've worked all over on every variety of thing, I think, across theatre and arts, and very collaboratively, as well as our own pieces, and there's a load of stuff on our website if people want to have a look.
Well, thank you very much. And Peter?
Yeah, thanks, John. So I'm Peter Bonnell. I'm currently the Executive Director at Dash, and I work remotely, but Dash, as the name suggests, is Disability Arts in Shropshire, but we work across the West Midlands, the entire Midlands, UK and internationally. And I run the organisation alongside our CEO, AD Heather Peake, and we're disabled led. I happen to be autistic, inattentive ADHD. I also have a thing called aphantasia, where I can't picture things in my mind's eye. And sometimes, lately, when I start talking, my eyes close. That's a little bit of a sort of a stim that I do from time to time. So if I do that, it's not like I'm sort of suddenly falling asleep mid-sentence or anything like that. Just it's the way my brain sort of computes things. So we exist, Dash. We work remotely, although ostensibly we're based in the Shropshire area. And in West Midlands, we exist as a disabled-led organisation to support, develop, and do as much as we can to work with artists who happen to have a disability, to work on residencies, exhibition projects and workshops, and develop national and international partnerships. But as John, I think, alluded to a minute ago, I used to work at Quad, and I was the senior curator, then programme manager, and then director of Format Festival for 13 years, but during that time I commissioned a lot of digital work. So we were well known for working together, John and I, on a range of digital projects, and a lot of participation, of course, commissioned VR, AR, game engine based works, website based works, web based works, exhibition installations, and so on and so on. But also before that, I left from 2004 to 2011. I worked in a rural space called Artsway in the New Forest. I was there for 7 years. So I've got experience of working remotely, working in a city, in a big city arts complex, and then working in a rural environment in the New Forest. And at Artsway, we also were really well known for not a huge amount, but commission a lot of digital works as well. So that's me in a sort of a nutshell.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I just forgot to say as well, I do have some questions to kind of discuss in the panel today, but if people want to ask questions throughout, please jump in, put your hand up, and then we'll come to you. We want this to kind of be free-flowing, so questions might change, questions come in, that's great. But I think, Peter, if I can just stick with you for a second, because you touched upon that just a little bit there, but can you describe a bit more about that experience of working with digital arts practice, including kind of any use of AI as a tool or a theme or a subject?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because we never, I was racking my brains about this, actually directly commissioned an AI work from scratch, so to speak. But we did do, and I worked on a number of projects that worked with artists who had AI as a core element of the producing work. And one of the early works I remember is a piece of quad by an artist called Cecilia Wagner Falkstrom. I'd probably have to write that down if you wanted to Google that. You know, I may have misspelled it a little bit, but there's a word called. I was looking this up again just yesterday. It was called. It was Frank, but it was something like "Let's Talk About Frank." And what it was a. Is this the right term? You're probably going to tell us, but a generative sort of AI piece. And all it was like a speaker embedded on the wall in the gallery space, according one of the corridor spaces. And what you would do, we decided to put a massive big text, because even then, about 12 years ago, people were terrified of AI and what it meant. They thought it was basically, I've said to you in the car coming up, everyone thinks AI is automatically like the Terminator, we're all going to get blown to bits, tomorrow, because it's going to come alive and kill us. So you had this work that was in the corridor, and you could ask it questions and it would respond with this speaker, so it'd take its time. And all it was a very basic one. I don't want to demean the artist's work. She was a recent graduate actually from Royal College, but what it was, she developed a software where it would sort of take key words and then search its database and just parrot back that response, so it looked like there was an interaction, but it wasn't really. It was just being trained to understand certain key concepts. But it would never work because it needed either myself or the team or technicians to restart it or reboot it each day, because it used to go a bit crackers, because if the computer's on all the time, it wouldn't quite work. So people would stand in front of this speaker, Frank, and nothing would happen. It doesn't work. And then suddenly feedback, but there was a lot of people as well I found that were not necessarily frightened, but were just, well, no, they were. They was really skittish around it. It's like it couldn't. It felt like they were being watched. They were talking to a real sentient being, which it really wasn't. And we worked with a number of other projects. One was a robotics focus show, and I titled the show, and I'm not a Gary Newman fan, but Our Friends Electric. And R is O-U-R, not A-R-E. And I had a number of robotic works. We worked in particular in that project with a couple of artists called Anna Dimitriou and Alex May. We had this plinth made with sides to it, and on it with these little robots. And we told everyone that if you sort of interacted with them, they would stop. And they were called something like shy robots or like something like that. And so everyone was playing with them, and they'd move around, these little robots, and they'd come up to the edge of the wall, then they'd stop and turn around. And everyone, it's like what's the anthropomorphic sort of approach, where everyone thinks that these things are real. And all they had was a sensor on it. And then if it detected your sensor, it just the software just said turn around and go the other way. But everyone thought it was alive in some sort of way. And then myself and a lovely, wonderful curator called Laura O'Leary, we co-curated a show called How We Make Meaning, just as we came out of the pandemic. And it's with two artists, a Turkish artist called Memo Akten, who uses a lot of AI software to create images. And he did a piece called The Entire History of the World in 60 Minutes. But the interesting one was we worked with a Nigerian American artist called Mimi Onuwaha, who would make work about data scraping, data turking, and particularly how that affected minorities and people working in the third world and exploitation, and how AI software isn't alive in any way. What it is a tool that learns things, and it needs data and data sets to learn things. So it was all about the the mechanics of what AI needs to do to exist and survive. We also, later on, I worked with a group called Animate Projects to do a screening program called Identity, and we showed a work by Jake Elwes called The ZZ Show that was featured a drag queen in his sort of generated AI video work, but the point of Jake's work was that these sort of data sets or the parameters of what AI is sort of set up usually by straight white men in America, right? So how does the system understand what it means to be LGBT or drag or you know, from the LGBT background, because it's biased, basically, in some sort of way. So these are the sort of things that we did, but we never really quite got around to commissioning an AI work direct. Right. But we did work with a lot of AI artists using AI as tools in different ways.
And I find it interesting you brought up work with the artists, the African artists, because you know, a lot of data sets are there by manual input by human beings, yeah. And so a lot of that information comes from human interaction. And there's a big movement around AI toxicity at the moment where artists are deliberately tagging their work with the opposite of what it is to disrupt that. And so I find that really interesting. I suppose kind of reflecting the question to yourself, Rob, as creatives, you and your brother creatives, kind of where are you with kind of the use of AI in your work, and how much do you embrace it or how much do you steer clear?
I think it's full disclosure would be that I'm probably like everyone else here in that I'm not sitting here as an AI expert at all. But I'm in a field and a world like we all are where it's in and coming and arriving, and there's this sort of shadow on the horizon as it's thought of. But for me, it's very much in this world of it being a tool and a resource and a medium and an element that finds its way in, and we can then go and use in certain ways at certain times potentially, but it's very much not about it being AI or not AI. And I think there's a tendency for us all, because of our interaction with, I suppose particularly the visual end of AI, that we're kind of seeing all the little videos and the memes and this, that and the others, and is it real and is it not, to be quite black and white about that. And is that AI? Is that not AI? And actually in our work, and in I think the majority of creative work, it'll be about some aspects of artificial intelligence-esque computer work being in the sort of pipeline of a process, but 100% not about just this idea of, oh well, you can just get AI to do it now, you know, rather than you. I think it is a form and a medium which has many and varied varieties. We're used to it in certain little bits and pieces, you know, as we use our phones and, you know, we're talking to them, or it's just giving you a quick sort of overview of something. There's that end of it versus, you know, the notion of a kind of full film that's entirely AI made. Most of the time, I think we're somewhere way in the middle of all of that, and there's this fluidity with it. So yeah, I think in terms of like very specifically around projection mapping, there are definitely people who are playing with it, using it, trying to input, you know, what they might want into a thing. We don't use very much. It would be the simplest way, in a kind of very, I'm going to go to an AI, you know, to Higgsfield or something and start to make something on there. We don't do that very much. In the software that we use, there is definitely AI going on in there, and that's getting bigger and more in there. So you take an After Effects or something, which is our mainstay of where we are in Adobe. There are layers of all kinds of bits of AI that are going in there. A lot of it's backdoor, you know, or back room. You kind of didn't really think about it, but like it'll render your stuff quicker than it used to. Why is it doing that? Because it's iterating in a different way. It'll take out backgrounds, or you can ask it to do that rather than literally cutting it out. You're getting these kind of alternative methods, and I don't see that as particularly frightening at the moment. I think they are tools and resources, and yes, you in theory could do it all through an AI process, But even if you look at what those AI processes are, they're really convoluted. Like, they're not like you just type one thing and on it goes. It's back and forth and iterative, and you've got to go through this one to get an image that will go through this one, that might make a video that will go through this one, that you pull it apart so you can make use of it, and then there's 4 more different ones. It's a complex old beast, even if you're trying to do everything through those softwares. And so yeah, for me, it's in this interesting period at the moment of what's it for? What does it do? Is it useful? I come at it a little bit at the moment of, like, if I want to make a cup of tea, I can go and make a cup of tea, and I don't really think about how to make the cup of tea. And then imagine bringing a person in who has never made a cup of tea and sitting on the other side of the room and having to tell them exactly what to do to make a cup of tea. There's an awful lot of places that can go wrong, whether they're just picking up the kettle upside down, or, you know, and you're going, no, don't do that, you know, and you'd probably get a cup of tea out of it, you know, particularly if you sort of got them to do it a number of times. But at the end of the day, I could have just done it, made my cup of tea. So there's a bit of that, I think, that is there at the moment, which is to do with the interfacing. So yeah, at the moment it's in there. There are definitely things going on. There's examples we can come to about how it's been used, but it's not taking over, I would say.
Yeah.
So,
and it's interesting you highlighting that process of, and I don't know how many people use AI in their creative practice at the moment, but it is that process of, you give it prompts, make one thing, and you take that thing and you do another thing with it. You know, it's very easy, I think, for people not using this as a tool set to go, here's my prompt, I've got something visual out of it, and what they get is what they get, but what they get might not be what they wanted, and so it's really easy to think that AI is just going to create everything for us, but actually to use it in the creative process is quite complex, as complex as the tools that we use already.
and I think that's, you're getting to the nub of where it's at, in that you can ask it of a thing, be it an image or something, but it's a bit like someone just sort of giving you a thing. What about this? What about this? Now, if you're going in and you don't know what you want at all, you know, you go, give me some ideas for, you know, some flower designs or something, you know, say, maybe that's good. Maybe that is like someone coming in and kind of just showing you things till you see something you like. But often you've got more of a sense of, okay, I'm after trying to make a flower that's got, you know, 6 petals and slowly uncurl, or, you know, whatever it might be. And it's not very good at doing that yet. It's good at sort of giving you ideas, and you go, nah, that's not it. And you can end up just spending ages unpicking it, and that tends to be what happens. So yeah, it's not a...
Can I ask a question? Is that right, of everyone? Because, so I went to, it's all this thing around immersive galleries at the moment that are happening. So I went, I've been to a couple. I went to Frameless in London, but last Friday I went to the Lightroom to see You're Not Alone, which is the David Bowie immersive experience, and I loved it. And you know, it wasn't linear in terms of chronologically, and it was all to do with his text and his kind of craft. But I just was thinking about AI and thinking about, it's not just about content, it could be about curation as well, about how something's put together or content is put together. I just wondered, you know, Peter, you know, you've curated so much. So it's not just about the content, but the curation of the content.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the same thing when I mentioned the How We Make Meaning exhibition. There was a great title that Laura came up with, actually, and it was just about, I think, what you're kind of saying about how the software is used, but what does it mean at the end of the sort of the system, so to speak. But what we wanted to do is to you know, because budget throw is limited as well, but we want to do something that maybe give a couple of different aspects of what AI is, at least of what it's saying in the world. And Memo's work, for example, was this sort of beautiful, sort of immersive video work that was like an experience just being in it. And it sort of took you through this massive sort of idea of the world from start to present day, billions of years in 60 minutes, which is quite a nice sort of concept. I think the real meat as well, though, was with Mimi's work, was the sense of everyone thinks that this magic stuff called AI is just this tool that you can. I mean, I've used AI. I've only ever used AI to make really silly cartoons of a friend of mine in the States. So that's the most I've done with it so far. But and then you see someone come up and you go, wow, that's brilliant. But then, if I have this right based on Mimi's work, how many thousands of people in third world countries who live on the breadline are putting all this data in and telling the system what a banana is, and they're living in abject poverty while I'm messing about with a cartoon image of my friend in the States where we live in apparent luxury. So, I mean, it was also about individuals particularly, I guess, from BIPOC backgrounds as well, and backgrounds of great deals of poverty in third world countries and how people are being exploited. So in terms of the content, it wasn't about, wow, this is this amazing AI tool, this is about what this AI tool is doing to other people at the moment. So it's trying to say something about, this is back in 2021, 22 as well when we did this show, so it's recentish, but I mean AI has blossomed and exploded into the public consciousness over the last few years now at that point as well. So we, initially when I was looking at what AI might be was the sort of fun elements of it perhaps, but then with Mimi's work and Memo's work was this more sort of profound sort of questions about where it is now. I mean, one of the things you were maybe considering talking about is the environmental aspect of AI, because it needs vast amounts of water just to generate the cooling systems for the servers. But does anyone know that who uses AI at the moment? Because we all use it. I mean, I told you about I've been going crazy on eBay lately. So when it comes to write a text, it goes, AI can write it for you. So I press click. But how many millions of gallons of water is that using to do my AI thing so I can sell my 10 quid Game Boy game on eBay? So there's all sorts of different aspects where it is. I mean, I personally am very wary of all aspects of AI. There's another thing as well that, see, these are all future exhibition ideas. But the other thing is that we are now in thrall of big tech, right? Google, Meta, well, Alphabet and Meta. We are now going down the AI route whether we like it or not. I mean, we're locked in because they want to do it because they're going to make money from it. Let's face facts. And you're not going to be able to opt out of this, are you? Really? You can't, I mean, some of the benefits could be, you'll get speedier medical, diagnoses but I think, even in 10, 20 years time, hopefully I'm still here, and I'm sure there's going to be some kind of medical thing I need. But will I want an AI robot to diagnose my, illness or something? I want a real doctor, but the AI robot is probably more accurate. All sorts of questions. Is that sort of what
it is that. It was just when I was watching all this content of Bowie, who I'm a massive fan of, and I just wondered who curated it, and was it a person that curated it, or was it someone else who curated it?
That's the nub of it a bit, I think, for me in AI and digital more broadly. We touched on this when we were talking, is that maybe it's me, but the search for the human in digital work is something I think you kind of want, or you feel if it's absent, I suppose, and that is in our work we talk a lot about the grain and texture in pieces that we make, that we use digital means. Essentially we've got computers and projectors, but we want to feel like what we're making has the hand of the artist in it, or has a hand of a maker, because it does. And also instinctively, we touched on that often we're beaming our stuff out onto a physical space. There's a building, or there's a stage set, or whatever it might be, and that in of itself exists in physical space. It's real, tangible, touchable, and it brings with it all of this material and texture and history and change and light level, all this stuff. And so it sort of adds into our mix of digital, and that we kind of chuck it out the door at the end, and it's got all those things that a paintbrush has got, you know. And I think in this comes down to that experience of going into those spaces. Your that question of where's the person who chose this? Where's the curator? Where's the humanity in it? Bowie's bringing all of that in spades, you know. Because most of the footage is going to be film. It's grain. It's all stuck down in a physical way, even though it's then been digitised and tin. So it's bringing with it some of that heft. But you almost want that sense of and then this person has chosen this, or this person has chosen that, and I can feel that choice, and I can disagree with it. And our concern, if it's an AI, if you like, or our sense of uncertainty is, if that's not a person's choice, what is it as a choice? Do I get to like that choice? If it's not a person, do I get to just instinctively go, no, I want a person to be choosing that? And in a way, that's the nub of it for me. Is
I agree.
that AI? Is it all right? You know, essentially, if a prompt has prompted that and an AI has done it, there's still a certain person behind that, and if they're shining through, that's all right. It's more when you lose it, when you lose the connection, that we get a bit of unease.
Can I ask what you think about whether digital art and fine art and that area that I'll call fine art as compared to other art forms is in a position of less peril as to where the human is and how it's interacting. I'm thinking specifically about my daughter, who's a screenwriter. In screenwriting, there's a lot of discussion about whether there's an author, whether there's a writer, or whether AI, and she, because of some contracts that were sort of pending, had to, work was delayed for a year because the American Screenwriters Association, I don't know if that's the right name, were on strike for a year because the big producers in America looked like they were just going to replace writers with AI, and AI can do it, we'll just put it in, and where the human is in that, and how accurately or not AI can replace all of those sort of psychological ideas and interactions and conversation. And the same, I would imagine, I don't know, I'm talking really as a novice in all of this, that music is closer to that peril. Writing and music closer to that peril than maybe art, fine art, digital art. What do you think about that? I don't know.
I mean, I would say it comes back to these sort of core themes around authenticity and around human interaction and connection, and why we do all of this stuff in the first place. You know, why do we put a piece of music on? It's not just because of the raw qualities of the notes and where it goes and the rhythm and the texture and the chorus kicking in and there's sort of sing-along to be. It's because of the people behind that who have made it, who have crafted it together, and we're sort of buying in to getting a closeness to that individual or band or artist or whoever it might be, and that is very crucial in whether we like a thing, and this for me goes across every variety of output as humans. So you know, I can make you a pasta, and I can make a tomato sauce from scratch, or I can go and get a dolmio and shove it on the pasta, and they both have a place and they both have a kind of quality to them. But as individuals and as people and as a collective, I think we do hanker after that authenticity of the craft that's gone into it. And the AI is the worry, I think, potentially for people observing it, is the idea that it's a cheat, or the idea that you've gone around it, or that there isn't any of that craft in it, or whatever. And I think partly we have to learn that and come to understand that AI in principle isn't about a lack of craft if it's done right, or if it's part of the mix. It doesn't magic itself up and pop out and no one's bothered to do it. That's number one. So we've got to get used to the idea of this is a tool. This is like someone doing a sum on a calculator, not doing it long form. It's probably fine in certain contexts. It's not cheating, you know. but we will still hanker after that need for the authentic, for the real, for the tangible, for the connection, and that's not going to go away.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so I think the thing with screenwriting and music and knowing who people who do that work, and people are learning to do that work, my wife included, there are formulas, and those formulas are there, and there's guidebooks about like the 11 formulas to writing a screenplay, or the 11 formulas for writing an episodic TV program, and the same with music. And so producers and publishers look for those formulas because they know it sells. I think for me the difference between visual art, and it'd be good to get your opinion, Peter, is the formulas aren't as structured. They're the work's a lot more personal. In dance we have our own bodies, and the way our own bodies move, and that's going to be different to somebody else, even if the choreography is the same. And the same I think with visual art. I know that a lot of the work that I make is quite personal to me, but is also influenced by the participants that I work with. So there's no formula to that. It's a bit more free flowing. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, a very interesting point that you make, because I've been a curator for well over 20 years, and for the last few years I've been running alongside a CEO this disabled organisation. So I'm not necessarily a curator so much anymore as such, although I still am working on projects with curatorial themes and ideas. But when about a year and a half ago, I restarted my own practice, because I trained as an artist up to MA level. I was primarily a painter, but my other element was a photography. Now I'm a photographer, but I also was the director of a photo festival for a number of years, and I saw lots of photographers come in. And the amount of times I would see work that was so similar, because you can't help it because of the nature of the medium, you know. So with my own work, what I try and do is, and what I say to artists is, be genuine, just be true to the work that you make, and I think that should come out. But there is something quite interesting, is that, I'm going to mention this to you, there was a well-known case recently of a photographer called Boris Eldagson, got that right, and he won a major art prize, which I forgot what it is. But this wonderful image, and it's like two women, and it was like a woman to the forefront, and behind her was someone just peering behind her. So he won this major prize, and then so they gave him the award, and then he said, well, it's created with AI. And he's very open about AI and his use of AI. And I think he may have refused the prize. But my other point, though, I was going to try and make is that, whether or not this is relevant, is that it's all going to come down to disclosure at the end of the day. Like, do you actually hide that you're using AI to create this work, or are you very open about it? And how will people react to those two different scenarios going forward? So, you know, if somebody finds out something, I mean, with Boris's work, I think there was an uproar, and a lot of people were applauding him, and a lot of people are interested in the debate about where AI is and how you're creating him, because he still had to take his own sensibilities, his own direction, his own desires and ideas in the work, into that work anyway. And he would have told the software to do things in particular ways and then manipulate it until he got the image he wanted to. But yeah, I think disclosure is going to be a really interesting sort of key thing going forward in the future. And the thing is as well, Kim saying we had a good old chat coming up in the car, and he was saying, like, your daughter can recognise an AI image, and I feel that I can recognise an AI image now, because they're usually too good to be true. Or there's a very funny one I saw recently of a woman sat there with supposedly her hands out on a tray or something, and someone's done a meme. It's like how to spot AI, and you've circled little tiny things in the background, but when you look closely, her hands are actually feet. So, or you'll see things like, you know, there's videos that people go, wow, look at that video, and then you realise somebody's got 6 fingers on each hand, you know, so that kind of thing, where AI doesn't know the difference really. It's just going to certain set parameters that it's working to. So it's a brilliant tool to create with, but I think it's going to be, if you're very open about what it is that you're creating or not, and then what happens if you're not sort of honest, and then somebody finds you out, and all the debates around that. And then I feel that eventually people will get so used to AI, because I think it will become more and more uniform the more it learns, funny enough, I think, really. And then that element of the creativity, the artist, the spark of the artist, the spark of the writer with ideas will still be the most crucial elements to work going forward. Although I will say one of the very final thing, this is not screenwriting or art as such, but I was listening on the, I call it wireless, but Radio 4, and it was Michael Burke's The Moral Maze, and he had a program about the moral ambiguities of AI. So he did his typical opening monologue, and he was typical, probably because it was in the Michael Burke, it was his voice, it was him speaking, and he read out this introduction to the talk, and then at the end of it he said, and that open segment is all AI. And he said in his hotel room the day before he just put in a few prompts and then AI spouted out this opening monologue. The trouble is, being autistic, I don't really spot things very easily anyway. It's not part of my sort of skill set in my brain. So I don't really read people very well, but I thought I was just like Michael Burke, and how Michael Burke talks and what he talks about, how he says things and how he frames them. But it wasn't him actually directly writing, he just told stuff up to do. But where was he in that as well? The humanity in that? Because he's still in there, isn't he? There's some kind of mix. But he disclosed it, you see.
True. Yeah, I just think that that's the crux of it. Nobody really wants to be hoodwinked. So most of the debate at the moment when you're talking about it is all about, is that AI or is that not AI? How do we spot it? And that is all predicated on the idea that it's trying to pretend it isn't AI.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going to be the issue. I think we will quite quickly get to a point where we just want to know, as a consumer, what are we consuming? And I think where you'll see it moving much more is in it being in the mix, as it is in all films. We're very used to the idea that a lot of what we see in a film is not strictly speaking in camera real. What we're not seeing is or where we still get a bit annoyed, is when the entire thing we're seeing is not real. We want the person, we want the individual, and it's at that point at the moment of us constantly just worrying about whether it's AI or not AI, and we just have to kind of come to terms with the idea of either just someone telling us all the time, or being accepting of the fact there's probably some AI in the mix there, but it's not all of it, for me. So.
Just want to come back to something you said, Peter. I suppose it kind of also reflects on that formulaic nature of different mediums, and I suppose that's where AI has been more driven and why there is a lot more pushback, because there are formulas, but we still need the man in the machine, the human in the machine. But Peter, you mentioned around that kind of bubble that's starting to happen around AI and things feeding into itself, and that's certainly something we're seeing more and more with other software like Unreal Engine, which is the game engine that makes games. That's been seen as a lot more. It's a lot easier to use on a kind of entry level, but it means that everything starts looking very similar, and there's a whole issue around that at the moment. And that's also the case with like Adobe, where they've been very good. They are using AI generated tools. They're paying artists to contribute the work to that model, but then you start creating based on an artist's work, so everything starts looking the same. Well, do you think we're in that's a problem area that I think as a creative you are aware of, concerned of, or how are you kind of tackling that?
I think you'll feel it. You'll start to feel that the blandness setting in is something that we get quite used to. Again, in other fields, in anywhere where something has gone from being individual and kind of your baker in a shop making a loaf of bread, and to a mass production of some sort, and the AI stuff, is sitting in that world of the global output, mass produced thing. We have to bear in mind, I think, that the majority of companies who are pushing the AI are pushing it in order for it to make stuff that goes back onto their own social media empires, that which is all fine because we're all in on them and we'll kind of get an excitement out of them, but it's in their own interest to big up that entire cycle of it's got to all be made for this so that it can go onto Instagram, so TikTok, so that it can feed TikTok so we can eat it more, round and round and round it goes, and we will get bloated, and we do get bloated. And I think you talk to young people these days, and they're pretty quick to get pretty fed up with all of that stuff, and there's a search for the grain and the texture and the authenticity that is coming through. I think we're in the middle of that world at the moment, that we're slightly behind the curve, you know, as a different demographic. They have always seen it, and it's always been there as part of their world that they occupy, and they just take it or leave it a bit more than we do. Oh yeah, it's just AI, I'm not interested in that. I'm going to go and buy a vinyl record.
Well, that's what I was going to say, exactly.
This is happening.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
real,
yeah.
And it isn't. And I think that's the key. It's not instead. It's not that they won't stick iTunes on or listen to, use those means, or you know, it's not instead, but it is as well. And I think as makers, we have to have a bit of sense of what we can bring to the table, and to be quite proud of it and go, no, I can do, and there are things I do that people want to see. And just because you could get that somewhere else potentially, maybe people don't want to, maybe they still want to see what I could make and do, and that's all right. There's room for both, you know, and I think that's what you'll see with younger people is a sense of the need for the tangible and the real in them, and this mix that we've got. You know?
And it's interesting you kind of touched upon young people, because I was going to come to that. And Peter, you also mentioned around the use of water in AI kind of training models and things like that, because that, when I speak to young people about use of AI, is very much both of those things. They are very conscious of the environmental side. They're very aware that they are moving towards a future which can often look bleak to them, but they also are having this kind of quiet revolution, I think it's called, where they are becoming more detached from online life. They're being more aware of mental health and well-being by disconnecting because of how kind of over-imposing, certainly social media, but the kind of use of AI and all these tricks. And I suppose I think it's to be expected now, but 10 years ago working with young people go, oh, everything's going to be screen, they're going to adapt to this, they're going to really want to do it, and actually they don't. And just to pick up on what you were saying there, do you think there's a role then for the older creatives, the older artists, to kind of help those young people with those more, dare I say, traditional or kind of more older based creative skills? Is there a place for that handoff? Do you see that happening?
I think without feeling like you've got all the answers at all, in that I'm not sure people are ever quite losing those skills as much as we think maybe they are. Maybe I'm just seeing the wrong young people. We have this tendency to constantly talk about them as if they're always on their phones. And if you did the math, you're on your own more. I'm on screens more than my kids, for sure, because I work on screen, because I use my phone, and we don't worry about that. We're just like, oh, I'm doing proper stuff. I think yes, you can get that sense of the usefulness, and trying to look with people around what are you doing with those tools, or how do you learn some of the craft of the animating side that we use or whatever. We talk, in my mind, my approach is always to do with this sort of input-output, consuming or creating type of offset with your interactions in this whole digital world. Really, is that what you're doing is more important to me in terms of an output than how you're doing. So my son is 13. He's on Blender, and he's animating, and he's on, he's got these skills. He's got a 3D printer. He's that world. He just does that quicker than I did too. But it's all about, are you consuming or are you making? So if he's just sitting there and scrolling at a load of whatever they are on YouTube that's just giving him the next thing, he tends not to do that. What he's doing is looking at how to do a thing and how to make it, and how he's going to make it, and he's going to spend 4 hours creating that thing. I don't care what he's using to do that. That's an output, not an input. And so hopefully our job as kind of people who make is to get that idea of the craft of the make, of just the time. What you use is less relevant for me. It's more there aren't shortcuts. Is so much that you can't just AI it. It's going to take the time, and that's more key for me.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is that we started my own practice is that it feels like a necessary thing to do to make work. It just feels joyous to be creative in a way. And I think that creative spark is never ever going to be replaced fully by AI. I think sort of what you're kind of saying there a little bit as well. I think that independence and that binary and that personal, the real, the sense of you as a self, and everyone's very different. We've all got very much similarities. I think that'll can never be replaced by AI, no matter how hard it tries, I think. No matter how hard it mimics, because you'll still see slightly similar or not quite as real as something else. Or everything, or we'll see too similar to everything else at one point, and then people will get, just bored of the blandness, perhaps, in a way. I think that this creates, because my daughter's the same as well, actually. She edits, puts things out, uses a tablet to draw on. It's just the same as when I used to sit on with a piece of paper in front of the telly drawing comics and cartoons. I couldn't sort of zoom in and out of the paper. I love that idea. So she does that, goes in really detailed and goes back out again. But she shows her the stuff she does, but she's still learning a technique. She's still using a pen to do it in her hand.
Yeah, there's a physicality to it. And I think there is this wider question about, is there just an entropy problem with AI, and that you're in a finite system? If it's only ever looking at things that have already been made and then no one ever makes anything else to feed it, then will it just become a kind of, you just mix the pot till it's grey and there's no colours anymore? There is a question around that. I mean, in theory, as humans and as makers, we are doing that as well a bit. We're always just iterating things that have occurred before, but we're bringing these sort of new, potentially infinite elements of change to it. So it will always require feeding. It will require news. It will require that. And if it gets to a point where it doesn't, we will start to feel that big time. We do it all the time. We go out to buy a jumper, and what we're looking for, we're just looking for something that maybe is ever so slightly different to another jumper that you've seen down the street. Why is that? It's just because we want it. We want that sense of, it's a little bit different, and I think that's not going to go away. But if anything, I mean, that's just going to expand. So.
And that's it. Our role as creatives, as artists, is to see things and expand upon what we're seeing, and to take things in new directions, not to do the same. So if things do start becoming very similar, then naturally we're going to kind of push outside of that. So I think that's a really important thing to kind of mentally take forward, and the hope for the future and the use of digital and AI as a tool. I just want to kind of touch upon, because we're kind of in Derbyshire, and that kind of notion of, Derbyshire as a region is synonymous with kind of traditional making and craft and heritage. And like, what kind of benefits or even concerns do you think that digital art or AI can bring to kind of rural locations?
I think it's something that we, in our work, so I grew up in Matlock, and Matt lives in Stanwell still, so Matt and I kind of, Derbyshire's, core. I think in our work, like I've talked about before, we tie to location very crucially in everything we make, usually because it's being seen in that location. So it's a little different to an online or a film or a pure digital, if you like, in that it tends to have a physical space that it goes and occupies, and that's front and centre from the beginning of the work. You can't make a thing without it being in that place, and it can only ever happen in that place, and I can't take something I've made to go on the town hall in Chesterfield and stick it on another building somewhere else. It won't fit, and it's got nothing to do with that place, and we're like, what are you doing with that? You have to make a new one. But I think that is something, we mentioned before, but the absence of a geography, or the absence of a sense of location and physical space, is something that in digital we again there's a slight sense of like the grain going again in that way. When we see something, we experience something in a VR world or in a space. That sense of the isolating out from location, I think, can sometimes be a bit problematic. That you feel like, well, am I really anywhere here, or is this just a sort of parody of something else? So I think for digital in a rural location particularly, because I think you're just used to the idea of it being a real world out of your window. How you get that into your digital practice, I think, is really interesting, and that's something that, you know, pride in place and making work in a space. Again, we're so used to the idea from someone makes a pot. This pot was made out of the very clay from which I am, and it's been kiln dried, and a location specific thing within that piece of art or craft, if you like. It's just ingrained in the idea of it being good in the first place. How does a digital artist do that? How do you make a thing in a place geographically that gets the essence of where you are into it, and is that part of what you should be doing? And for us, we do that all the time because, like I say, it's kind of inevitable. But as soon as you take that out, what is it? You know. So yeah, for me, that's what it's about: is be where you are. I think we're there.
Well, there's got a number of things I can perhaps relate to, but something that's just coming into my head. I'm actually working with and mentoring a Derby-based artist, and he's got a DYCP grant, and he's a photographer primarily, but he's learning LiDAR techniques, 3D scanning.
Right.
And it's quite interesting because his work is about archaeological sites. So he's going around Derbyshire. Because I've actually been there and done a digital work about this place. It's the Seven Ladies. What's it called? Do you know? Nine Ladies.
On Stanton.
Stanton, yeah. So I think it's part of farmland. In fact, I did work with an artist in that particular place, but what he's doing is going around scanning these places and creating these immersive works that is about the place. So he's taking his drones and his 3D scanning software, scanning these archaeological sites, so you get these 3D sort of maps of these things and creating an immersive artwork from that. In fact, when I was at Quad, we went with a Latvian artist called Zane Zelmeni to the Nine Ladies Stone Circle, and we had to go there, myself and Laura again, my assistant curator, because Zane was staying there overnight on her own in this, this eerie sort of rural space, scanning it to create an immersive VR artwork, which we then showed in the gallery at Quad on a VR headset. And it was this sort of uncanny, spectral sort of response to these burial mounds, these mounds of earth that are all around this place. So, I mean, I would, even when I was at Art Swing in New Forest, I would like to try and curate exhibitions that related to the environment, to the place where things are. But it's really interesting that the artist Chris, who's doing the LiDAR scan, he may go further afield in Derbyshire, but he's going to stick around Derbyshire and he's going to investigate and use digital tools and technology. So it's not necessarily AI, but he's going to use that technology to make that work. But I think it goes back to a little bit what you were saying, Stephen, about the hand or the voice or the presence of the person in the work. And I think, as much so I think you're saying, Rob, as well, is that it may well someone who uses the tools and uses AI in their work, but about Derbyshire, it's going to be about the stories and themes and ideas about this place. Mm-hmm. And it's like anywhere in the UK, and it's about how you take those themes and ideas. For example, it wasn't a digital work or an AI work, but I commissioned a work by film work with anime projects by an artist called Nariko Okaku, who made a tarot pack about all these myths and legends about Derbyshire and created this. Then she would do tarot readings as well. But she wanted to know about all the different folklore stories and supernatural paranormal stories or real stories about Derbyshire and Derby that she could take into this, I think, 21 image pack, and then created a film work around it as well. Beautiful, beautiful sort of work. So it's about artists taking the tools, but then still being artists in talking about the world about them, but using those tools to create these new immersive works. I mean, another thing as well, just though about all this new technology and we're wedded to screens, I used to sit in front of my Commodore 64 in 1983, in front of a screen, you know. I mean, there's also that, I read this story as well about, I think it might be an Apple executive, and he had a newspaper laid out, and his young son, this is about 10 years ago, and his young son was looking at the newspaper, and what's that, Dad? So the newspaper's looking, don't know if you can see this, and then the boy went like this, and he tried to pinch and zoom on a printed piece of paper. So we're all digital natives, our kids. My daughter's 16 and a half is a digital native, but she draws primarily using her iPad. But it's going to be about, the hand of the artist, I keep going back to that, is still going to be in there, but it's about maybe taking the technology into a place and using it in the place. But I think it's going to be even more impressive by taking the typical approach of the artist, but using the technology still just as a tool.
Yeah. I'm just wary of time. We'll come to question, go on.
I think it was more just commentary, I think, on what we've been talking about in terms of the kind of digital and the AI stuff around it being, it's a bit of a frontier. We're a bit of a kind of technological frontier, and there's hundreds of different sort of iterations of that throughout history, isn't there, in terms of where digital has moved, and not just digital but across the board, where technology has introduced something new into a society, and then society sort of repatriated that in its own way, I suppose, in that sense. And having that idea of the way that kind of, maybe with young people, looking at the background is I was a youth worker, a youth arts worker for 20 years prior to doing the job I do now, worked quite a lot in youth arts and technology, and it was quite an assumption that young people, like you say, were very into technology, but you can't make that assumption that young people know and have access to and use technology. You know, a lot of the projects that we've been delivering in the last 18 months that involve youth arts and technology, young people struggle to use mice. Because it's not part of their everyday thing. You know, I've got a similar story. My daughter was recently handed an Etch-a-Sketch and she asked for the stylus. So it's the same sort of thing. It's kind of, you know, it's a learning journey for the young people as much as it is for. And I think the importance of mentorship and the importance of having access is so key for young people, and having those opportunities, isn't it, really? So it's just a sort of commentary on that.
I remember seeing a number of videos when they showed these teenage lads and rotary telephone. What the hell's, how do you use it? You know, so but then, you know, a rotary telephone 100 years before that, no one had seen a rotary telephone.
She's got a better vinyl collection than I ever did at that age.
At the end of the day, that's an interface question rather than a what's it actually doing. So that's about how do I get it to do what it's doing? That's like a manual car versus an automatic or something. It's just same output, but what do I do to press the buttons? And I think we mustn't lose sight of that it's really what AI's got it's got a natty title, hasn't it? It's AI, artificial intelligence. It's a trajectory of computer programming and algorithms, and it's not just this whole new world. It's part of this long process.
I think it is a norm to young people, I've found as well. You know, in personal and with the work experience. I trained as a graphic designer in the 90s, so I'm just looking at the screen with the font and the font on. That's all done digitally now. I remember doing that on paper and working it all out. And that tool's made my life a lot easier.
Of course.
And so on and so forth. And I can see how the AI will make young people's lives easier if it's used in the right way. It's not kind of corporatized, I suppose. And I think creativity, there's no bounds on creativity, is there, in that sense? And I think creativity is that perfect tool for letting people have more access to technology. Has always been the argument that I've made.
I think that's a very good kind of way to kind of end the session today, and just to say thank you to Rod and to Peter for joining us, and for everyone else for coming along. Some great questions in the room. I certainly have a lot more conversations to have with the people here, so maybe we'll grab a cup of tea and or coffee and carry on. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very
Great, thank you very much.
It's not got much left in it.